Greetings, everyone. Happy New Year. Lumberg here. It has been a minute. I have been super busy at work and really haven't had a chance to make any new content. So here I am finally. I got a chance to make something worth sharing and hopefully helpful to some of you. So this is my merger spreadsheet. Many of you have already seen this before. It's really just a record keeping tracking to help assist in your merger planning aspirations, because let's face it, nobody really can control who Camel merges with when. All this does is helps you kind of plan and coordinate and see, what are the possibilities. So similar to before, I've listed all the mergers from since the beginning of time, and that's this first tab in this merger list master. It's the same link if you have the link from before. Of course, the link will be down in the description below for those that are seeing this for the first time. And off to the side here, I like to put, who is in line for a second merger. And you can see here, there's quite a few been waiting on a very long time. So let's take a closer look at these guys. Poor Nation 293, 298. 293 has been waiting for over 2 years, so 2 years and a month. So it's been a long time. The last time they were merged was January 2022. It is now January 2024. And here you can go through this list and you can see some people here. This lists every single nation that has gotten a second merger. And if you scroll down here to the bottom, you'll see that, some of these just got it. The new cadence is that Camel seems to be merging when they switched to the two-nation merger. Some of the nations that went into the two-nation merger a little bit more frequently. Those that are kind of in this globe 4, I believe, that did the three-nation merger last seem to be really struggling, and Camel has not quite kept them up. If you look at this history and lock tab, I really like this view because it shows you, the presentation of every single nation. Where did they end up? So, for example, if you want to look at it here, if you go to the very beginning of time, Nation 99, they are still Nation 9. Where did they end up? They're still Nation 90. What about Nation 100? They went into Nation 2. What about Nation 101? They went into Nation 1. So this is a graphical representation of kind of where all the nations are today, where they started and where they ended. Down here at the bottom, I really like this view here. If you wanted to find out kind of who you have an opponent, if you have a void opponent, you want to look at your nation, and nobody can keep track of what happened when. I barely can remember when we merged and who we merged with even. But if you want to find out a nation that you're researching, for instance, I think Nation 465, we faced them in an elite war. They looked really strong. Let's say I'm curious to know who went into Nation 465. So you can find it here, apply it in this filter, and the instructions are there in the yellow on the left-hand side. So here you can see I just selected it, and now it's showing me, all of the history. So if I scroll a little bit here, you'll see that, they have total 6 nations in the merger. They had a nation in October. They had a merger in October 28, and then they had a merger in December 8th. Right. So 2 mergers. And these are all the nations that make up Nation 6. So that's it. This is pretty useful. I like it. Hopefully you find this helpful. Here are some instructions for you if you are not familiar with it. If you want to edit this, you have to make your own copy. You can't edit it. And I know a couple of people request edit access. That's not what that's intended for. If you go to these 3 dots at the top right corner, all you have to do is just go here and say, share and export in this tab here, and then say you can either save it as an Excel copy, you can make a copy and share it on your Google Drive. Now you do need a Google account to do this, but you can make one of those pretty quickly and easily. It doesn't have to be a real one. You can use a fake one. And as you can see here, I don't see your information. It is just an anonymous person. You can have that in your settings. So there is no tracking or sharing of information. So you can just make your own copy. That being said, I added something new that I'm pretty excited about looking at. So this is a pivot table of all that data that we looked at in the first tab here, which is, give me all the history. And where did I get this history from? It's basically from the announcements in the official AOZ or AOO Discord. So, and it's tracking of all these. So let's look at this summary here. This is basically the merger dates where the mergers have happened. And this is how many mergers. Meaning if 2 nations merge, that counts as 1 here, right? So if 465 merged with somebody else, that just counts as 1. this is saying how many of the total nations were in the merger. So very simply put, there's 18 mergers that happen with 36 nations, each with 2 nations merging into one. So the average number of nations per merger is 2. And you can see that that was the new trend, right? So Camel made that switch in July 2023. And before that, they used to do 3 nation mergers. And you can see here the average sometimes changes, because here this average is a little bit different because the lock nations are included in this data used to get 4 nation mergers instead of 3. But for a while, it's all been 3, right? So in the very beginning, I think there was some that they used to do 4 nation mergers here, you can see. So from the beginning of time, there is 2 that is not included here in my filter that I excluded. And those 2 are, I think there's 4 actually. So some of them, the dates were unknown. Camel didn't really publish them in their announcement, so I couldn't really figure it out, but I was able to figure out that they merged. So those are not excluded. Those 4 mergers are excluded. So I think those were locked nations where I didn't know the date and couldn't find it. So in this summary, I also wanted to show you, this game is 5 years long, right? 5 years plus. This is kind of the trend, the annual trend of what's happened. So here you can see that, they started off slow. And remember, the number of mergers are supposed to increase over time because there's just more nations, right? Camel is now on nation, I think 1120. Let's look here. If you look at the history, they are on 1120. That's a lot of nations, right? And some of you just started this game maybe in one of these new nations. Some of you are here for a long time in nation 1. And so it's been a lot of mergers since, and a lot of new nations created since, as it loads up. So in this merger summary, I wanted to show that you can see here that there's also a new trend that happened, right? So there are certain months with no merger, and those are usually when Global Conquest is running. And if you look at Global Conquest, if you just look at it now here, in Global Conquest now, it really didn't give us much of a break, right? So the last Global Conquest happened, it started in September and it finished in November. And now the new one just started right back in January. So when Global Conquest happens, and you can see here, right here, it says 56 days. So almost 2 months that Global Conquest will run, there will be no mergers. And if we go back to our list here, and that you can see that, here there was many months without a merger here, but because they were just getting started. And then look, there was just 2 months without a merger. There was a merger in every single month here. First year really doesn't count. There was a couple of mergers in the end, so I didn't count them. And then last year there was many months without a merger because Global Conquest happened. Now we'll most likely have February and March without a merger because now Global Conquest started again, and it will last until March. And so this increase in the frequency of Global Conquest suggests that there will be fewer mergers just because there's fewer time. And Camel has made that their policy that they don't usually do mergers while Global Conquest is going. That may change, that may very well change, and it may need to, because there's a lot more nations now, and there's they have a limited worker pool, and those nation mergers take coding, take actions, and so I imagine that policy might change. And I haven't talked to anybody that has reached out to their VIP to see if that has changed. And if you have a VIP contact, reach out and see if that that position that Camel has taken is subject to change in the future, especially now that Global Conquest is more frequent. Global Conquest being frequent also poses another challenge for nations, and it's that it's very expensive to win a championship. And so you can see that here, that 299 won the Global Conquest last time, and they're probably just they're probably beat, so they're not even trying, right? So the people that already won it once, it's like, this is too expensive and too frequent. It needs a lot of gold, speed, and yields to win a Global Conquest championship for really limited rewards. It's bragging rights. So it's good to do it once, but the frequency means that maybe other people can have a shot, but it's bad news because it's more spending. Back to mergers, you can see here that in 2023, there was 177 mergers and 401 nations that actually participated in that. So in these months that there were no mergers, in the months that there was pretty heavy volume. One alarming trend, though, however, you can see here, look, there's some heavy trends here, but these most recent mergers in December and January are fewer mergers. Not only that, they involve fewer nations because they're only 2-nation mergers, right? So Camel, when they changed to the 2-nation merger, they promised that there would be more mergers and more frequency. The numbers really are not showing that. And of course, if you're waiting for a merger, that's not really being shown here. Now, keep in mind that there is one more interesting trend that I want to share and then end my video, is a very interesting one. So here you can see when I listed these, it was good to see. You can see the green are unlocked nation and the red are locked nations. What does that mean? It just means that when you try to enter one of these nations, let's say 1118, let's try to do that. So if you go into your map and go into here in the map view, Camel did this new map. It's pretty neat. We'll talk about that in another video. Click the globe down here. It brings you to the most recent nation. If you click on 1118 right here, 1118, it's going to tell you nation channel data is already full. That is really just garbage. It just means that this is a nation that your IP address will not allow you to enter. And the people in that nation, they get that same message when they try to enter any of the other ones. And this is the great Chinese firewall, that they do not want the players in mainland China from interacting with players elsewhere. So it's partly just a game policy that gamers in China or gaming companies in China do, and not really specific to Camel. So that's what locked versus unlocked servers mean. But there's an interesting trend that formed. So you can see here, I like to track how many new locked servers versus unlocked server ratio is there. So for a while there was a big spike, right? For every 2 unlocked nations, there was a locked nation created. Then there was a drop, and then it's like every 3 unlocked servers, a locked nation is created. So the ratio was 1-2, 1-3, then it went to 1-4 at 20%, back up to 1-4, and then it stayed at about 1-5 or 4, up, down. Here we noticed a big change. Look at that. Now look at the frequency in these. So either this model is failing or the game has lost popularity in China. There is not a lot of new locked servers being created. Remember, these new servers are a great way for Camel to just get people to be the top, spend to get to the top. And when the pool is smaller, they get, it's a whale generation algorithm almost, right? So you can see here, maybe there was some recent gaming changes. Those are driving it, right? So some time limitations for younger people, but they're really not making money from the younger people. They're catching those middle-aged whales like you and me that are, spending time on this, making content on this, and giving them free advertising and propagating this very addictive, money-hungry kind of almost predatory gaming structure. That being said, at least maybe if you're aware of this, you can see that, look, their China model isn't working, and we're the suckers that are still looped into this. You can see here that now the ratio has gone down to like 1-10 or 1-9. So really small. Only 10% of the new nations here being created are locked nations. So maybe there's something that they're seeing in the model that's not working. And that might be good for us because, some of these newer nations, remember the locked nations had an unfair advantage of more frequent mergers, more frequent, and more nations in those mergers, right? So that meant that their nation strength was very strong. For example, you can just look at 693. 693 is a monster nation with massive players. So let's actually find 693 and see what happened. Whoops. 693, I think, has one of the biggest BP and probably the strongest stat. Is hard to prove because it's and here you can see, look, they have gotten second merger as well, and they're a nation as high as where everybody else in this 600-700 range has only gotten 1 merger. This nation has actually gotten 2 to 3 mergers and 6 nations in it. So it's incredibly powerful, and of course has a distinct disadvantage for people that are facing this nation. However, they also, with more people, there's more drama and probably more civil war. So they're not as keen as working together. So for the events like Void, you can probably beat them. For the events where BP matters and the number of players matter and strategy, to some extent matters, but you just can't overcome that, participation. Like GC, they have a really, those locked nations have a huge advantage. That being said, now that there's fewer locked nations, there's going to be fewer mergers of those locked nations, and probably parity will come back. But maybe that's good news. Maybe it's temporary. These trends change. Maybe if they see spending in the locked servers, they will now create more. But right now, it looks like spending has slowed down in the locked servers, and there's fewer of them. I'm going to end this video with just a quick answering of the most common question that I get. And then we'll see, what are the criteria that, Camel uses to do mergers? And that's really hard, right? So if anything, that is a guess. So if you're in one of these nations really, dying for a second merger, or if you're in this group of nations here where you have never gotten a merger, you can look at some great content that other people have thrown out that I have done in the past that, gives you some strategies on communication and strategy and what happens in a merger. For those of you that are trying to, find out who you're going to merge with or try to create communication channels with the leaders of those other nations that you might potentially match with, and you're trying to get a sense for, who should I reach out to? Who can I possibly match with? It is very difficult to predict. All I can say is that the main criteria, and my guess is that it has to do a lot with spending and activity and bandwidth of Camel. So a lot of this doesn't matter, even if you spend nothing, if they don't have the bandwidth to actually facilitate and plan and code a merger, it's not going to happen. So a lot of it is random, and don't try to create logic and understanding when maybe the person doing it is insane, right? So I don't mean that they really are insane, but there's not a lot of logic, and you can spend hours and waste away your life trying to figure out what's the criteria, what's the logic they use. Some of it's just random. I think they just look at, of course, some of these features, they look at, spending, nation BP, they look at, a record, they look at activity, they look at, void record, frenzy record. I'm sure those go into it, but a lot of it may just be random and just the timing and when it's done. In some ways, I feel like I do more analysis than they do, and they just probably drop things into a hat and just randomly do it. They listen to their VIP players. Oh, I forgot to say, VIP player comments is, of course, a big proponent. They are very much driven by, what will make their big spenders happy. So don't try to waste your life away trying to predict and figure out who you're going to merge with. If you have great VIPs and those VIPs have good VIP reps, use that to your advantage. There's definitely an early notification and priority system. This is very much about who you know and how much you spend. So use that network. But all I wanted to share here is that, it might be a long time that you'll get another merger. Things are not looking, great in terms of the merger frequency and with global conquest, what's happening. So sorry for my long ramblings. There's this data here. You can use this and hopefully it gives you some direction as to how long you think you're going to have a merger, and maybe you just need to make the most out of what you have. As I say that, of course, we're in civil war in our nation, and some differences take a little bit longer to resolve, but hopefully we can resolve them. With all that, it's good to be back. Hopefully you guys are all doing great. Good luck in your upcoming void. Give me your comments. Always good to get your feedback, and I hope to talk to you guys soon. Take care.